Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday. Next Monday, we don't need to be here. So it's good to see that we have over half the class here slightly. That's an improvement from last week. We'll take whatever improvement we can get. Two more, looks like. All right, so let's take out your homework handout that you have for today if you haven't already. I think I called this one Worksheet 4, Advanced Enharmonicism, and there was only one side to this one, which is sometimes kind of nice. So, last class, those of you that were here, we did start talking about the enharmonic potential, the enharmonic possibilities of the fully diminished seventh chord, and how it can function in 4 different keys, depending on how you spell it. That was what I asked you to deal with in sections 1 and 2 on the homework, and then in section 3 I asked you to do a little bit of analysis, noting that there is a pivot chord that uses an enharmonic 7 diminished 7 chord to get from B flat major to G minor. So, as usual, let me ask, does anyone have any questions about something like this?
The second beat in the second line.
The second beat in the second measure.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got G, B flat, E natural, and B flat again. And I guess I'll just have to squeeze it in here. G, B flat in the tenor, E natural in the alto, and another B flat up in the soprano. And we are in the key of B flat major to try to analyze this chord. It's obviously, well, apparently to me, it's not going to fit nice and neatly in B flat major because it has an accidental, a chromatic fit, namely E natural. Okay? So, if I take a look to see what type of chord, it's just a triad as well, by the way. It's not a 7th chord. To see what type of triad it is, the E looks like it's the root. E, G, B flat, that's a diminished triad. And, diminished triads as well as diminished 7th chords can be secondary chords. They can. So I could think of this maybe as a 7 diminished, just a triad in first inversion of something that fits in B flat major. And indeed, I think that's the best way to analyze this. If E is the root, and I'm calling it a leading tone triad built on the leading tone, E is the leading tone, or T, to the pitch F. And F, in the key of B flat, would be the root of a 5-chord. Yep, so I would call that one just a triad in first inversion, 7 diminished 6 of 5. Yep.
So it's holding me over thinking about part 2, the D1. I did fine with the other two, but analyzing it in C for absolutely no reason was really confusing.
The D major one,
Yeah.
and you
because I
analyzed?
thought- I analyzed it first, so I got to C, and then I got to.
Okay, let's go through that one. Okay. That way, if I start from the beginning, that will help me recall, where we began started from. So this is going to be the second enharmonic spelling problem in section 2. And we've got the key of D major. And we're given a key signature. And we're given a fully diminished 7 chord. Well, we're not given it, but we're asked to start with a fully diminished 7 chord in root position. I don't think I gave it to you. No. All right, so we know that these are leading tone 7th chords. So the root of this chord is going to be the leading tone of D, which is C sharp. Okay, so C sharp. And to make it fully diminished, we need, and by the way, the C is sharp from the key signature, E natural, G natural, and B flat. Yeah, and by the way, when we deal with enharmonic spellings of the 7/7 chord, if you start off with the first chord and it's spelled incorrectly, that means all of these are probably going to be incorrect as well. Which is unfortunate, but that's kind of the way it's a problem that's based off of an accurate unit. Okay, so what we did last class is I said, well, as long as you treat each of the four pitches of the given chord as the root, you give each note its term as the root, then we can spell it enharmonically to a total of 4 different ways. This is a spelling that's correct with C sharp serving as the chord's root. But if I let the next note up, E, be the chord's root, I know that a fully diminished 7th chord on E is spelled E, G, B flat, D flat. And without moving or rearranging the notes, I have really all those pitches I just mentioned. E, G, B flat, and this C sharp is enharmonic with a D flat. So just leave the notes where they are, enharmonically respelling only the ones you need to get it to be spelled correctly based on the root that you've chosen. So E, G, B flat, D flat. And E is the root of this chord. So that means, why am I putting an natural? I don't know why I'm putting a natural on the G. I need extra work. But if E natural is the root, that means this is going to be a 7 chord in the key of F. And I would accept F major or F minor. Okay? And what inversion is this leading tone 7th chord in? So the 3rd inversion, so 4/2. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to treat the G of the original chord as the root of a fully diminished 7. And that will give me the notes G, B flat, D flat, and F flat. So G, B flat, and let's put the F flat over here, and D flat right here. Making sure that this chord sounds exactly the same as these other two. It should, since all the notes are either the same or enharmonic. And now this chord, as it's spelled, has G as the root, and G would be the root of a leading tone 7th chord in the key of A flat. A flat major or A flat minor would be a viable answer because they're both real keys. And this leading tone 7th chord happens to be 2nd inversion. And then finally, the last spelling is to treat the top note, the B flat, as the root of the 7/7 chord. But it's going to get me into a lot of double flats. So I'm just going to think of this top note enharmonically right from the beginning. I'm going to think of it as an A sharp. And then I don't have to spell any of the other pitches enharmonically. So I've got, let's see here, C sharp, E, G, and A sharp. Can go away from there. A sharp, C sharp, E, G. And as it's spelled, A sharp is the root. That means A sharp is the leading tone, which means this is going to fit into the key of D, either B major or B minor. And the function has a 7 diminished 6. So once again, when we go through the process, you should get a different base position for each spelling, root position, third inversion, second inversion, first inversion. And the keys that you come up with should spell a fully diminished seventh chord as well. In this case, B, F, A, flat. Does that help with that one?
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, another question?
Can I just ask about the pivot word on the third part?
The pivot chord on the third part?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Let's see here. So we have the notes A, C, F sharp, and E flat. And we're starting out in the key of B flat major, and it's supposed to function in the new key of G minor. I don't know if you noticed, but the two chords that are circled sound exactly the same. In fact, the chord that's circled in measure 1, that's a fully diminished seventh chord that's spelled correctly in the key of B flat. Because it's spelled as A, C, E flat, G flat. And what was your analysis of the chord there, can I ask? Yes, and what is it in inversion or root? Yeah, root position. So, if this chord sounds exactly the same, then what should the analysis of this be? Same thing, right? So 7. See, all you got to do is just think of the F sharp as a G flat, as it was in measure 1. So it's really the same sound, it's the same chord. But now this chord, as it's circled in the third measure, it's spelled correctly for the new key. And in this case, F sharp is the root, and A, the third of the chord, is on the bottom. So what inversion is this seventh chord in? 6/5 inversion, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so that's how I would do the pivot chord. Alright. We've got 15 minutes in. This time I want to collect this one. No in-class quiz or anything like that. So just make sure your name is on it and I'll pick it up. Sure, that's fine. Yeah. I think if you can begin to start thinking of some of these enharmonic chords, if you can begin to think of them in multiple spellings, in multiple ways, or at least see them spelled more than one way, I think that goes a long way to helping you understand how they fit in two different keys at the same time. All right. So, continuing on then, I do want to spend all class today, what we have left, going over again the enharmonic possibilities of this chord. It takes a little while for it to sink in, and I guess I want you guys to be as comfortable as you can before we go to spring break with these chords. So let's do another one of these kinds of things, because I think it doesn't hurt to see as many as possible. I'm going to start off with a different beginning chord in a different key, and we'll work from there. So last class we saw that any fully diminished seventh chord can be notated enharmonically 4 different ways. Because a seventh chord has 4 pitches. And it can be notated enharmonically 4 different ways with each of its notes or tones serving as the root. So let's start in another one of these examples in G minor. And let's start with a root position 7 again. Making sure we have the first, the given chord spelled correctly. Make sure it's C, E flat. If I treat or give each one of these notes of this given chord a term serving as the root, I know that the root of a fully diminished seventh chord is always T of the key. And so then each enharmonic spelling that I get over here is going to reveal a chord that functions as a 7/7 in one of 4 different keys. Of course, it will be in a different inversion or bass position each time. All right, so, and it doesn't, well, let's just continue to be consistent. So this is a chord that's spelled correctly with F sharp as the root. But let's respell this minor, let's respell this symmetrical diminished seventh chord with A as its root. What one note out of this would I need to respell enharmonically to get it to be spelled correctly with A as the root? The F sharp, right? I would respell the F sharp enharmonically as G flat. And again, don't move or rearrange the notes, just slide them over so you'll get a different spelling of the chord in a different inversion. So let's put it over here. Ready? A, C, E flat, G flat. Sounds identical to this chord. But when looked at this way, A is the root, it's going to function as a 7, turns out to be 3rd inversion. It's going to function as a 7/4/2 in the key of. Right? Because if A is the root, that makes A T. And if A is T, we have to be in some sort of B flat, either B flat major or B flat minor. Back to the original chord. Let C serve as the root. C, E flat. I would spell this as G flat, and then this one would have to be B double flat. C, E flat, G flat, and I said B double flat, right? And that's going to be in 2nd inversion. And if C is the root, what key am I in? D flat. Now, can I put D flat minor as a possible, because that's not a real key. So I have to go in this case with D flat major. And finally, if I let the top note treat that as the root, E flat. I don't know about you, but I don't want to try to spell a fully diminished 7 because root is E flat. I'm just going to think of this off the bat as a D sharp. So I'm going to get D sharp, F sharp, A, C. And that chord is 7th chord is in 1st inversion. And if D sharp is the root, that means I'm in the key of E. E major or E minor would be fine because both are keys found on the circle of fifths. They are real keys. So once again, I have the 7/7 chord in all of its bass positions, and the keys that it functions in spell a fully diminished 7th chord: E, G, B flat, A flat. So the fact that all 4 spellings sound identical allows a composer or musician to modulate from G minor for B flat major to D flat major or to E minor. You can get to any of these keys starting from any of these keys. It gives you access or a way to all of these keys just through a pivot chord. Just through a pivot chord. Now, I understand, we didn't quite get this detail last class. I understand why there's a 7 fully diminished 7 in a minor key like here, and like over here. But does the 7 fully diminished 7 naturally occur in major keys? No, what kind of 7th chord on scale degree 7 do we normally get in major? Half diminished, right? So how can I say then that this is a fully diminished 7th chord functioning in a major key? As a borrowed chord. Yeah. So when we throw a fully diminished 7th chord into a major key like this, we're just basically saying, oh, it's being used as a borrowed chord. Okay. Well, let's take stock of this now. If 7 diminished 7 functions in G minor, wouldn't it also then function as a borrowed chord in G major? And that's a good key. And if 7 diminished 4-2 is functioning in B flat major, could it not also function in B flat minor, which is also good? This one, no, can't function in D flat minor because it's not a real key. But couldn't this one also function in the key of E major? Because E major is a real key. So, because the parallel modes or keys, I guess, of all of the given ones are also accessible, and the 7-7 can be used as a borrowed chord, I can not only access 1, 2, 3, 4 keys, I can access 5, 6, 7 keys. I can modulate from G minor to this key, from this key to this key, from this key to this, any combination I can get from here to there, from point A to point B, using the sound of F sharp A C E flat, which is, again, to me, that's very powerful stuff. Now, the last thing I should probably mention is that any enharmonic respelling of these keys that I have on the board that are real keys would also be accessible in the modulation. Okay? Enharmonic respelling of these, that's not F double sharp, that's not going to be any kind of key. Is A sharp major key? No. But is A sharp minor key? Yeah, the enharmonic respelling. Okay. Is C sharp major a key? The enharmonic respelling. Yeah, it is. Is C sharp minor a key? Yeah, it is. And then enharmonic respelling of these keys is not going to give us anything that's real. So, how many total keys now have I come up with that can be accessed just using this sonority here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you'll find out with any fully diminished 7th chord, you can actually modulate and get to 10 different. That's the maximum. Because of using it as a borrowed chord in parallel major keys, and because also you could use it in enharmonic keys that exist as well. So, whatever, I mean, the next thing that you write musically, whether you do it over spring break or over the summer, if you want to change keys and go to some distantly related key, I might suggest using the fully diminished 7th chord as you get it, because you can sure get to a lot of places using it. All right. Enough of the theory. Now let's go ahead and apply it a little bit. I'm going to get rid of all this. Yeah. I think so. let's say I give you a problem like this. How would I find out what inversion of a 7/7 chord would be correct to fit on the bottom of that pivot between those two keys? How can I solve for the missing information? Well, I mean, rather than trying to do all of the calculations and think about this in your head, maybe it would be helpful if I actually spell the 7 diminished 4/2 in F minor and write it out. Yeah, let's do that. Okay. Let's see, do I want to mess with a key signature? No, let's not do that. A 7 diminished 4/2 in F minor would be E, G, B flat, and D flat, correct? With the D flat on the bottom? Okay. Now at least I've got a visual here, something I can look at. So in order to answer the question as to which inversion goes here, all I have to do is look at my spelled chord and say, is there a note in this chord that either is or is enharmonic with T of the new key? Right? Because these are always leading tone 7 chords. What is the pitch? What pitch is T of B minor? A sharp. Do I have an A sharp in that chord either directly or enharmonically? Yeah, I do. Actually, there's one right up there, right? The B flat. So let me just respell that chord with the B flat as A sharp and all the other notes that I need to respell to get it to be spelled correctly. In other words, A sharp, C sharp, E, G, right? Okay, so A sharp. Don't move the notes or rearrange them. The C sharp's going to be on the bottom. And E and G. You see how this chord, if I got the accidentals right, sounds exactly like this one. And if I were to play it on the piano, you can't hear the difference. Why did I spell it as with the root of A sharp? Why did I spell it this way? Well, because I'm trying to go to B minor. And A sharp is T in B minor. So looking at it spelled as in the new key, what do I put in here? What inversion do I use? First inversion, right? 6/5? There you go. Problem solved. A 7 diminished 4/2 in F is the exact same sound as a 7 diminished 6/5 in B minor. That's what we're saying. Okay. So we've taken care of that. Now, let's say that, as I always do, let's say that I wanted us to write out a progression with Roman numerals that modulates from F minor to B minor using an enharmonic minor 7. I'm going to do it, actually I'm going to do it down here, because eventually I'm going to move it down, because eventually I want to incorporate it, at least the pivot chord. So we put our pivot chord, as you know, midway through our progression. And what am I starting in? I'm starting in F minor. Four flats in my signature. Now this becomes a little trickier. What kind of chord can come before 7/7? Well, let's think about its function. Do you remember from theory 2? Does it have top, dominant, or predominant function? No, 7-7 has dominant function. It's a weaker dominant than the actual 5, but it still has dominant function. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just place a predominant before it. In other words, let me go ahead and maybe I'm going to use a 4 chord. And it's going to be a little 4 because I'm in minor. All right, then I know I should start with 1. Just put a few in here. There. I think that's enough. Some chords to establish the original, the old key of F minor. That should be enough. Now, the question is, what does the 7 diminished 7 chord go to? And, based on its inversion, what does it go to? And that's why we reproduced that chart from 32. Well, was it? Yeah, maybe it was 32. I think it was. What is this? Oh, and I forgot one very important thing in my chart. It should be chastised. I don't know if you remember this, but there should be an arrow. So now, what should 7 diminished 6 5 go to? 1 6. I'm in a minor key. That's no big deal. So I'm just going to go to a minor 1 6. In fact, I'm going to put it over here a little more because I want to leave some space in the staff to write not only the pivot chord, but its parenthetic or enharmonic stuff. And then after the 1 6, let's just do 2 half diminished 6 5, 1 6 4 5 1. That's fine. Now, I'm going through this because one of the tasks on your next handout for homework is going to be to write a progression like this. This time, I only want you to part write the pivot chord, its parenthetic chord, and then the chord it goes to. I don't need you to part write anything before the pivot this time. But it's always good to start out with putting the pivot chord in there. And it can only be spelled, well, we have to spell it at least initially, spell it correctly in one of the 2 keys. If we spell it correctly in the old key of F first, let's spell it as a 7 diminished 4 2 in F. I think I had one of these on, I think I did because we found out what the pivot chord was. I'm going to do this, E, G, B flat, and then the D flat has to go on the bottom. That's going to give me this. Alright, so about, there's the D flat on the bottom, and the key signature. Spacing wise, I could put the root, which needs an accidental, I can put that in the tenor. And then I can put the G in the alto, and the B flat, which is flat from the key signature in the string. Oof. There I have my pivot chord spelled correctly in the old key. Now, this is not in actual music, but I want to see how the voices are arranged when it's spelled as a 7 diminished 6 5 in B. And slide this up a little bit more. Actually, let's do more things in this here. Okay. What did I need to spell this chord correctly as if it's in the new key? A sharp, didn't we say A sharp, C sharp, E, G? Okay, don't move the notes. B flat becomes A sharp. G, I don't have to respell. E, I don't have to respell. But what do I respell the D flat and the B? C sharp. There you go. That's what the chord looks like in the new key of B. And I'm writing it this way because I'm going to part write it as if it is spelled this way correctly in the key of B minor, so I can go to a 1/6. I remember this a little more vividly perhaps than you because I just taught this in theory too. But how many tendency tones does a 7 diminished 7 chord have? It has 2. It's got the leading tone of the key, which happens to be in B minor, happens to be in the soprano, right? So that has to go up. And it's got a 7th to it, the chord 7th, which is G, and that always has to go down. Now I can see my tendency tones a lot clearer than if I'm looking at it this way. Yeah. So that means this has to go down to, oh, and look at this, I gotta remember to, I'm going to B minor. Look, I'm still using the old key signature. Okay, so B and F sharp, and then I'm going to 1/6, so that means the bass has to be, sorry about that. And I want to try to avoid doubling the bass in 1/6 chords, so instead of coming down to a D, where could I take my tenor? Up to the sharp. And that's as far as and as much as I would want to incorporate. Even I sometimes forget, unless I put a bar line, double bar line in there and change the key signature, it's hard to remember that you gotta have accidentals on pretty much almost every note. Because we're modulating the keys that are so remote or distantly related that their key signatures are so different, we're probably gonna have to have accidentals on every note, unless you do change the key. But I wanted to show you how, first of all, you find a pivot chord between the two keys. You put that in 4 voices, good spacing. Then you enharmonically spell it as you need to fit in the new key, and I put parentheses around that. I call that the parenthetic chord. This is not actually in real music, but I put it there so I can see where my tendency tones are and so I can part write it properly. So the chord that follows, and once I'm in the new key, then I won't fit. Parenthetic. Does anyone have any questions about this process? Yeah. Yeah. I got the whole, I wrote the whole thing on my own, so I can play the whole progression. Yeah. Just want to make sure I got it right. So we're starting in F minor. And it might sound something like this. There's the pivot chord. And then B minor. It makes sense to our ears though, because when you hear this symmetrical chord and you don't know which note is the root or what inversion it's in, it can resolve logically one of 4 ways. I could have resolved, if I resolved it as a 7 diminished 4/2 in F and took it to like in one of these chords in F, that would be logical to our ears. But no, I decided to resolve it as a 7 diminished 6/5 in B, and that's also logical to our ears. Okay, any other questions before we continue? All right, make sure we got everything here. Oh yes, I forgot all about that. I don't know if any of you have your textbook with you, but if you do, you can turn to page 412. And I will try to turn the TV screens on here to show you an example out of the book, which will be very much like another example, a short analysis example to analyze on the homework. trying to go through all these things that are just like, similar to the problems on the homework, so you have a good way, a good model to follow as to how to do these. I'm looking at the very first example on the top of page 412. Oops. That's too much. That's about the best I can get it size-wise to see pretty much the whole thing. I felt like I got a little bit. Now, let me take a look at the directions really quick, because this will be similar to something you have on your worksheet for Wednesday. Each of the following examples contains an N harmonic modulation. Analyze each example after playing it slowly at the piano and listening for the point of modulation. Do not try to analyze these examples without hearing them. What I'll do is I'll freeze it on the screen here. I'll go to the piano and we'll listen to it. And I want you to follow along, and I want you to see if your ear can tell, after just hearing it one time, in your ear, tell me roughly where in the progression you hear the change of key. Okay, so we start in E major, and it sounds like this. Tell me by looking at the last chord, what key did you modulate to? G major. We're going from E major, 4 sharps, to G major, 1 sharp. Distant and related keys. Let me get rid of this. All right. Any idea approximately where or what measure out of how many measures is this? Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. About 9 measures, don't count the pickup. Yeah.
The pivot happens in measure 6.
Okay. By the time you get, are you counting? Now, are you? I just want to make sure. Are you counting the pickup?
No.
No. Okay. Yeah. By the time you get to the 6th full measure, we are definitely in the new key. Okay, because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's the measure that has D natural on the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so D, the notes there are D natural, F sharp, A, C. And these pitches fit perfectly in the new key of G major as a 5/7. So, where might a pivot chord be if that one is clearly in the new key? Yeah, let's check the chord right before. But you're right, you're in the right area. And the chord before, it looks like it has E flat on the bottom, C natural, and F sharp, and A. Well, let me back this up just a here. Does that look like it's spelled correctly in the new key? Yeah, it kind of does. F sharp being the root. F sharp, A, C, T flat. You see where I'm getting that from? Because E flat's on the bottom. Okay. Now, the trick is, in the 5th full measure there, you need to see it enharmonically, or think of it spelled correctly in the old key of E. Think about what a 7/7 chord is in E major, what the root of that chord is. And if I can ask you, there's only one note in the fifth full measure that needs to be thought of enharmonically to get it to be spelled correctly in the old key of E. That's right. Think of the E flat on the bottom as a D sharp, and poof, you've got a D sharp, F sharp, A, C. And that's how it would be spelled correctly in, I mean, this isn't the exact voicing, but these are the pitches, right? That's how it would be spelled correctly in the old key. And what bass position would that be in then, if the D sharp is theoretically on the bottom? That's the position, right? Isn't that neat? So it turns out that measure 5 is the magic chord. It's a fully diminished 7th chord. It sounds like a D sharp, F sharp, A, C in root position, which logically tells our ears it belongs in the old key. But it also sounds and functions like an F sharp, A, C, E flat chord, which is a 7 diminished chord in third inversion, which logically fits to our ears in the new key of G major. So really, I think if you can understand and you can see the chord both ways, analyze it properly as the pivot chord, you know, the rest is just basic analysis. That's all it is. This is the main thing here. Can we listen to this passage one more time? Now that you know that the fifth, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, the fifth full measure is the pivot chord, and you can see how it's functioning both ways. Isn't that the same chord that you get in measure 5? This time it's resolving as it should in E major. We get it again, but it's going to resolve differently. And now we're in G. Now that you know that this is not some kind of witchcraft or sorcery or magic. How are we doing? Does this make hopefully a little more sense than it did last week? Any questions before we get ready to go? All right then. I've got one more handout for you. This one is front side only again. Some analysis. There's some part writing in the middle, and then there's one of these things that we get. Is anyone going to make a trip to see anyone that's quarantined? Does anyone want extra copies?
I think that's
Okay, how many copies would you like?
Melissa, until Aiden has a bunch of questions.
That's true.
I can post another, find out if he doesn't listen.
That's true. Okay. Yes. Would you like any copies or is it?
I'll go.
Okay. Would you like any?
I can say something.
Okay, I'll give you one.
Yo, whoever can do
Thank
something,
you.
I'm showing it. Look out for holding on these guys. And I will read it with you because I'll be in homework to do the speech meeting because I need my money. And my tutor needs a chemical back and it's $200.